This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
China reaffirms its commitment to reduce carbon emissions and pledges more support in fighting the pandemic. Egypt calls for a balanced agreement on Ethiopia's Grand Renaissance Dam. And Libya's eastern-based parliament passes a vote of no confidence against the interim prime minister. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers. Here are more stories making headlines this hour. In business news, Uganda's stock exchange partners with MTN Uganda to launch country's first digital trading service. And in sport, three-day women's-only sports festival draws to a close in Tanzania. We begin this news hour in New York, where world leaders have gathered once again at the UN General Assembly to discuss COVID-19 and other global pressing issues. On Tuesday, Chinese President Xi Jinping attended the general debate virtually. He reaffirmed China's goals of reducing carbon emissions and pledged to offer more vaccines to nations in need. Nathan King reports.
I'm here to sound the alarm. The world must wake up. We are on the edge of an abyss and moving in the wrong direction.
The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres opened this period of the UNGA where the world leaders speak. He basically shamed the entire world while saying the science had been spectacular in terms of its timing and finding multiple vaccines from multiple areas of the world. The inequity in distributing those vaccines, especially to poor and underdeveloped countries, was shameful. Essentially, that when it came to ethics, the world had failed. So that was a real wake-up call. President Xi, this time last year in his remote address, also called for the world to come together when it came to the distribution of vaccines. China has pledged by the end of this year to supply 2 billion doses, 200 shots in arms across the world, and wants to make it a global public good.
当务之急是要在全球范围内
Our pressing priority is to ensure the fair and equitable distribution of vaccines globally. China will strive to provide a total of 2 billion doses of vaccines to the world by the end of this year. In addition to donating $100 million to COVAX, China will donate 100 million doses of vaccines to other developing countries in the course of this year.
Obviously, it was also good to hear before November's big climate conference in Glasgow in Scotland, the COP26, to see that China reiterated saying that it would reach peak carbon emissions before the end of the decade, before 2030, and also that it would be carbon neutral by 2060, which was an announcement made a few months ago, which actually surprised the world because China had not put a label on it.
中国将力争
China will strive to peak carbon dioxide emissions before 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality before 2060. This requires tremendous hard work, and we will make every effort to meet these goals. China will step up support for other developing countries in developing green and low-carbon energy and will not build new coal-fired power projects abroad.
The fact that President Xi Jinping pledged there be no Chinese financing abroad for any coal-powered energy stations, electricity generating stations, is a big deal because, as we know, coal is one of the biggest pollutants. The fact that Chinese financing has been so important for the Belt and Road Initiative and development across Asia and beyond, that will go a long way, the world community thinks, with this announcement of trying to essentially not necessarily get to that target of global warming below 2 degrees Celsius, but at least mitigate it.
Well, Zambians have been reacting to the speech made by Chinese President Xi Jinping. Isaac Mwaipopo, the executive director of the Center for Trade Policy and Development, believes that President Xi's statement has pointed out the policy direction for how China will develop and the win-win cooperation between China and other developing countries.
We welcome the remarks and the speech that was delivered by the Chinese President Xi Jinping at the ongoing summit of the United Nations General Assembly. And the remarks that he uttered actually giving a clear policy direction in terms of how the Chinese government is approaching development and the way it interfaces with other countries, be it developing countries. And it is our appeal from the Center for Trade Policy and Development that the developing countries should take advantage of this call coming through from the Chinese government and clearly define their development aspirations within the framework under which the Chinese are projecting to undertake partnerships with the developing world.
Joe Biden used his first address as U.S. president to the UN General Assembly to stress his commitment to reestablish the U.S. at the forefront of international diplomacy. He emphasized joint efforts to combat COVID-19 and climate change, but failed to address a number of controversies. Sarah Walton reports from New York.
Despite concerns that this year's United Nations General Assembly would be a mostly virtual event, the hall was as full as current COVID-19 restrictions allow, as Joe Biden appeared in person for his first address to the organisation as President of the United States. And without mentioning his predecessor by name, he made it clear he was working to erase the legacy of Donald Trump.
We're back at the table in international forums, especially the United Nations. We are re-engaged at the World Health Organization and working in close partnership with COVAX to deliver life-saving vaccines around the world. We rejoined the Paris Climate Agreement, and we're running to retake a seat in the Human Rights Council next year at the UN.
Biden made repeated references to the importance of multilateralism, stressing the need for nations to work together for a shared future. But his speech followed a number of events that have tarnished the US's image on international cooperation, including the chaotic withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan and the recent nuclear submarine deal with Australia in partnership with the UK that's led to a diplomatic spat with France. President Biden made no specific response to the criticism, instead highlighting the need to protect human rights in Afghanistan and strengthen support for so-called Quad members in the Indo-Pacific.
UNGA is kind of like this festival of bloviation. And, it's very rare that you'll get a world leader who will stand on the stage and directly call out, another world leader or address the proverbial elephant in the room. So I'm not surprised he didn't kind of talk specifically about France.
And while Biden distanced himself from Donald Trump's rhetoric, he didn't abandon his focus on China. He also referenced disagreements between the two countries on trade and intellectual property rights, but insisted he doesn't want conflict.
We're not seeking, say it again, we are not seeking a new Cold War or a world divided into rigid blocks.
The president also called for a global plan to address COVID-19 vaccine inequality, promised to double US funding of climate projects in developing countries, pledged $10 billion to address hunger, and renewed the US commitment to reviving the Iran nuclear agreement. And analysts say there were no real surprises.
He said everything that everybody wanted to hear, and maybe that was part of the problem. It came across as a rather pedestrian, necessary, but slightly boring speech.
After 4 years of Donald Trump, Joe Biden's speech was something of a palate cleanser for the UN General Assembly. But when it comes to the key relationship with China, it was clear that strong areas of contention remain. Sarah Walton, CGTN, New York.
During the opening of the general debate, African leaders spoke on key issues ranging from terrorism, democracy, COVID-19, and climate change. CGTN's Daniel Arab Moy reports.
The 76th UN General Assembly is dealing with many challenges affecting its member states. In a pre-recorded address, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi urged the UN to hold accountable countries offering sanctuary to terrorist groups.
ونشدد في هذا الصدد And we emphasize in this respect the importance of holding to account countries that support terrorism and embrace their supporters, among those who host foreign fighters and provide them with sanctuary and support, or who facilitate their passage on their own land and who thereby threaten international security.
In his maiden speech before the UN General Assembly, Zambian President Hakainde Hichilema emphasized the need for a global democratic community.
I wish to emphasize that it is the duty and indeed responsibility of all of us in the global democratic community to make democracy work for all our people. We can't do this by delivering democracy dividends through accelerating economic development, balanced distribution of resources and among our people, and our people accessing opportunities for a better life. This is what will make democracy attractive to our people in our individual countries.
The Democratic Republic of the Congo's President Felix Tshisekedi assured the UN General Assembly that Africa does not need charity. Tshisekedi, who is also the African Union chair, spoke on the need for the continent to benefit from constructive win-win partnerships.
L'Afrique n'a pas besoin d'aumône.
Africa does not need charity. Africa is fighting to gain spaces for liberty and action in a world which is constantly competing to forge a better destiny and to contribute more to the general progress of humanity.
On his part, the President of the Federal Republic of Somalia, Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo, spoke of the need for a collective global response to the COVID-19 pandemic.
The global health pandemic laid bare the frighteningly unequal world that we all live in today. The different pace of response within nations and regional organizations highlighted the vast gap there is in terms of opportunities between the developed and developed world.
Rwandan President Paul Kagame called on the UN General Assembly to recommit achieving the Sustainable Development Goals with a focus on climate change.
That commitment must put climate change mitigation at the center of our efforts. The severity of weather-related disasters is increasing year by year. We cannot afford for the result of COP26 in November to be inconclusive or divisive.
The 76th United Nations General Assembly continues, with more African leaders expected to deliver their message before the Assembly. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, for more on what's coming out of the UN General Assembly, we're joined by international relations and foreign policy expert, Dr. David Munya. He's also the director for the Center of Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg's Confucius Institute. Thank you so much for joining us in the program, David. How relevant is the UN General Assembly to the continent?
The UN is a critical body for the continent. Where most of its issues are handled. It's an arena in which the African continent work with the international community to deal with a host of issues, from conflict to issues of health and developmental issues. And therefore, since its formation, the UN, particularly in the post-Uhuru in the 1960s, the African continent constitutes the largest number of member states, and therefore it gives the UN itself legitimacy. However, there are quite a number of problems in terms of lack of transformation of this body, where the African continent is not represented within the highest supreme body of United Nations Security Council.
David, we also saw that there were some hard-hitting statements at the Assembly, especially from the DRC president about Africa not seeking charity and it needing to be seen as an equal partner. However, this is not the first time that we're hearing tough talk like this, David. And On the ground, though, it seems that even leaders themselves are yet to prove themselves here on the continent when it comes to service delivery to their people. How can African leaders move from rhetoric to policy-led actions?
I think, firstly, we have to understand the DRC's President Tshisekedi's speech, first and foremost, as the current chair of the African Union. So I think his speech carries much more weight, that he's not just speaking for his country, he's speaking for the entire continent. In a context where the powerful countries, particularly United States, and allies tend to undermine the very same body that there's a lot of talk in terms of peace and security and development or health at a rhetorical level. When it comes to real delivery of vaccines, I think there's a lot of inequalities at a global level, and Africa is really fighting to ensure that it is taken seriously. The challenge, as usual, it's also at the domestic level, that some of the African leaders are unable to deliver due to a number of challenges. One has to do with lack of good governance or lack of support at the global level. But as we move, the continent, it's increasingly speaking with one voice. And therefore, I think the most powerful countries will have to listen to Africa in dealing with its own challenges.
David, thank you so much for all that. International relations and foreign policy expert, Dr. David Munyai. Well, the UN will be deciding on who will represent Afghanistan at the General Assembly. The Taliban have requested to speak, as well as the ambassador of the Afghan government ousted by the Taliban. Zmarilai Abbasin has more from Kabul.
The Taliban have been struggling to finally get the international recognition, and that's why they've been searching for every possible opportunity in regard to talk with the international community and be in touch. As Zabiullah Mujahid yesterday in a press conference said that there are struggles going on to finally get the international recognition, and that's why they've been meeting several international figures. Just yesterday, the acting foreign minister of Taliban, Amir Khan Muttaqi, met with the UN agency chief, and also Deborah Lanes and the UNHCR chief, and also there were many bodies of the UN who chiefs are already meeting the Taliban leadership, and that's why a source told me that they were willing to participate in the UN General Assembly, and they haven't received any message. On the other hand, the former UN ambassador of Afghanistan, Ghulam Isaaqzai, was also trying, and he sent his accreditation letter to the UN, while the Taliban say they are no more representing Afghanistan, and that's the new interim government of the country that would be representing. On the other hand, it's a necessary for Afghanistan, particularly the interim government of the Taliban, to get international recognition, and if they have a say, according to most experts, they must be given a time and opportunity.
Well, let's move on to Egypt now, where President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi is calling for a comprehensive, balanced and legally binding agreement on the operation of Ethiopia's Grand Renaissance Dam. Speaking in a pre-recorded statement to the UN General Assembly, Sisi expressed Egypt's concerns over the dam, saying the Nile was Egypt's lifeline. Ethiopia, Sudan and Egypt are still trying to resolve the dispute through African Union-led talks.
Egypt has sought the help of the United Nations Security Council to send UN observers and bolster African mediation efforts. Egypt remains committed to reaching as soon as possible a comprehensive, balanced and legally binding agreement on the filling and operation of the Ethiopian dam. This aims at ensuring the survival of 150 million people in Egypt and Sudan, and to avoid causing irreparable damage to the people of both countries. This is based not only on the values of equity and logic, but also on robust international legal grounds which call for the fair and just use of joint water resources and international rivers.
Well, CGTN's Guram Chala is in Addis Ababa and joins us for more on this story. Guram, what has the reaction been from Ethiopia on the Egyptian president's remarks on the Grand Renaissance Dam?
Well, Hannah, Ethiopian officials at the Ministry of Irrigation, Water and Energy agree with most of what the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is saying. They are saying that fair water usage of the Nile is important for all countries, the Nile riparian countries, not only Ethiopia, Egypt and Sudan, but also other countries, because this is a natural resource that African states must base themselves on fairness and equality and utilize it for the purpose of freeing themselves and their people out of the bonds of poverty. However, any agreement that is going to be binding, according to Ethiopian authorities again, should be legal in all terms, that is, equal users of the water. One country deciding to use most of the share of the water and the other one should ask for permissions is not going to be something that is going to be palatable for Ethiopia, according to foreign ministry officials, for instance. So, Hannah, in general terms, what we know so far is that Ethiopia is ready for negotiations that is going to be held under the African Union's mediation, and that is going to also help the three countries, it's at least anticipated, to come to terms so that they can resolve the problem once and for all. So the reaction so far is that legally binding agreements should be based on a win-win approach, not one preventing the other from the usage of the water to free the people of one country from the bonds of poverty. So we should wait and see the African Union's meeting, how it's going to resolve this matter. But so far the stand of Ethiopia remains to be one and the same: fair usage of the Nile water.
Guram, what update do you have for us regarding the current status of the dam?
The Ethiopian Grand Renaissance Dam, Hannah, as one of the largest hydroelectric power generating dams in the world. It is going to be the first one in the continent when it comes to size, and the 6,000 plus megawatts of power also makes it the only one in the continent in power generation from from water energy. The current status is close to 90% of completion of the dam in general terms. In detail, civil work is almost 100% completed. Hydromechanical work is also completed almost 80%, which also includes other structural works of the dam. 24/7, 24 hours and 7 days a week is the work schedule of the dam, which has been the case for the last many years. Ethiopia intends to start power generation, preliminary power generation, in the next few months, Hannah, and this is much anticipated as the country has just announced that the fixing of the most important turbines for this preliminary power generation is completed at the moment, and the trial work will begin in the next few weeks' time. So in general terms, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is expected to generally be completed in the next year or so, and power generation to begin in few months, and work is going according to schedule.
Thank you so much for that. Guram Chala speaking to us from Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa. Well, Sudan Sovereignty Council has called for unity among the Sudanese people. The council's boss, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, made the statement after Tuesday's failed coup attempt. Military officials have blamed troops from the armored corps for it. The officials say dozens of troops are under arrest as investigations continue. Sudan has been under the leadership of a military and civilian transitional government since the ouster of Omar al-Bashir in 2019.
All our regular forces now have one heart. I brought our brother Mohammed Hamdan, the deputy chair of the Sudan Sovereignty Council, with me so that no one would argue and say that the Rapid Support Forces and the army forces are at odds with each other. We all want to reform this country, and we are in talks with the political parties every day to tell them that. To tell them to be united. We told the Forces of Freedom and Change to unite as they were on the 11th of April 2019, the al-Bashir overthrow, to bring the rest of the political parties to work together in order to preserve and protect our country. We will keep repeating these words until this matter is achieved.
Well, for more on that story from Khartoum, we're joined by Naba Muhyiddin, who's been following this story very closely for us. Naba, good to see you on the program. Just give us an update on the latest regarding the failed coup attempt.
Yes, actually the military said they stopped over 20 officers and soldiers, and they are under investigation. Also, the head of the Sovereign Council, the commander of the military in the same time, he assured that the military is protecting the transition and will not allow any coup to take place before the elections expected in 2022. He also accused the civilians in the Sovereign Council of seeking the power and chairs by saying, like last day or yesterday, they said there is calls for the protest to protect the transition. So the head of the Sovereign Council, he accused the civilians of seeking the power and look after power. And it shows the dispute between civilians and military generals in the Sovereign Council. Also, people are awaiting the results of the investigation. And there is ongoing meetings between the Sovereign Council and Ministers' Council.
Naba, from what you've heard, how does the government plan to prevent coup attempts such as this in the future?
Actually, the situation is very fragile. They need to work on a lot of things. One of the things is to make sure that there is uniformed forces, because in Sudan right now there is a lot of militaries, a lot of troops, a lot of militias. There is a lot of rebel groups that signed and recently joined the peace process in Juba. They should work on this, because this is a very fragile situation. Another thing is they should work on the economic situation, because if any coup happened in the future, they should make sure that it won't find any support from the people. And another thing also, the integration of the uniformed forces. There is a military, rapid support forces, rebel groups, a lot of armed forces. So integration and rebuilding of the uniformed forces is one of the solutions, besides the economic situation, because it's the biggest threat for the transition in Sudan right now.
Naba, thank you so much for that update. Naba Muhyiddin, who's been following this story for us, speaking to us from Khartoum. Let's now take a short break and return. More news making headlines here in Africa Live, including Libya's eastern-based parliament passes vote of no confidence against the country's interim prime minister. And Burundi grenade blast kill at least 5 people and injure 50 others.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
I've been Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. You're watching Africa Live. Well, Libya's eastern-based parliament has passed a vote of no confidence against the interim unity government led by Prime Minister Abdul Hamid Dbeibeh. The United Nations support mission in Libya has, however, insisted that Dbeibeh's government will remain in office. 89 out of 113 members of parliament voted against him on Tuesday. Here's Adel Marouchi with the details.
Tension between the Libyan interim government of national unity and the eastern-based parliament has been growing since Abdul Hamid Dbeibeh was appointed prime minister. To diffuse the tension and get parliamentary approval of the state budget, Dbeibeh appeared before parliament MPs for questioning after being summoned earlier. But while the move was supposed to ease tensions with the legislative chamber, events took a sudden turn when the legislators passed a no-confidence vote against the government at this session in Tobruk. That surprised even those who support Libya's eastern bloc.
The House of Representatives' announcement is shocking to everyone. The government's days in office are being counted down. The no-confidence vote could affect the roadmap to elections. Moreover, it could force Dbeibah to forge alliances with opponents of the parliament, like the Muslim Brotherhood and armed militias, which could ignite Libya once again, as it did with the former government.
The United Nations Support Mission in Libya says it's concerned about the no-confidence vote. In a statement, it confirmed that Dbeibah's government will remain legitimate until elections are held to replace it. Libya's Western-based High Council of State has also criticized the move.
It's an illegal move. There are 38 members of parliament who opposed the no-confidence vote. They signed a petition saying parliament is violating its own bylaws. The High Council of State must resort to court because they violated Security Council Resolution 2952. It endorsed the political agreement which states that when it comes to a no-confidence vote against the government, parliament must consult with the High Council of State, which didn't happen.
Right after the Eastern-based parliament's vote, Abdelhamid Dbeibah went to Libya's Martyr Square in Tripoli. In a display of popularity, he urged Libyans to rally on Friday to show support for his government.
I believe Parliament is obstructing the Dbeibah government's roadmap, shall it decide to remain in power further. I think when the confidence is withdrawn and the government surpasses its remaining time and power, the no confidence could allow us to form a new cabinet. The Parliament's move is a double-edged weapon. It could be in favor of the people, but it could also force Libya into a dark tunnel that could fuel division between the East and the West.
The Eastern-based parliament is now calling Dbeibah's cabinet a, quote, facilitation government. The new description will, however, not change anything on the ground. Believing in the power mental health could have on society, Egypt wants to create awareness among the public. Only 10% of the people with mental health issues seek professional help. It's why the country wants its citizens to be able to express their feelings and realize whether they or anyone around them needs professional help. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Well, speaking to us from Cairo now, we're joined by political analyst Amira El-Sayed, who's also a writer and editor at the Egyptian Gazette. Thank you so much for joining us, Amira. What are some of the main issues at play here, and what does this vote of no confidence mean for Libya's unity government?
Passing the no confidence vote for the interim or for the transitional government is considered the latest example of the longest standing dispute between the rival Libyan institutions, a matter that further undermine the UN efforts to bring stability and unity to the oil-rich North African country that has suffered from turmoil for almost a decade. So now definitely this move sparked a heated controversy because this government in March it won the trust of the House of Representatives with sweeping majority, and now within just 6 months, now the Parliament or the House of Representatives decided to withdraw trust from this government. So this throws the future of the elections due to be held this December into uncertainty. If we highlight the recent statements released by the spokesperson of the House of Representatives, he said that the elections will be held in December, and that the current government will work as a caretaker administration. However, we find that the High Council of State, they rejected this measure and they said that it is not valid. On the other hand, we find that the speaker or the spokesperson of the House of Representatives said that it is valid and it has been held in accordance with legal provisions. He said that the vote took place in the presence of around 113 members, with 89 person voting for this decision. On the other hand, the High Council of State said that it is not valid and it is against the established procedures because taking any parliamentary decision, it requires the presence of a minimum turnout of 120 members. So definitely such clashes, it has a negative impact on the future of the roadmap, and it derailed the roadmap set by the UN to bring stability to this nation. And that's why the UN mission in Libya released a statement saying that it expressed its concerns about this move, and this government should resume its work, and it is legitimate until another government is formed after the election. So definitely we can say that there is a foggy future is waiting for the political roadmap set by the UN.
Amira, we're not very far from those December elections. We're just a few months away. What do you think might happen in the interim to regain confidence, especially among the people, so that these December elections do go ahead in a way that inspires confidence in what's about to happen and the change that should come to Libya?
Yeah, definitely this move, it had a negative impact on the future of this election, whether it be held on time in December or not, because both entities, the highest Council of State and also the House of Representatives, they also clash on the election law to the extent that the High Council, it had its own version. And that's why the UN mission in Libya said that the House of Representatives should give a priority to issue a law regulating the election. So we have to wait and see what will happen in the upcoming period. Meanwhile, we have seen that Debeba in a sports event, he said that we are pushing forward with plans for elections and we will not side with any party that seeks to destroy our country. But I think that such move or the no confidence vote further complicated the issues in Libya.
Thank you so much for all that, Amira, political analyst Amira El-Sayed. She was speaking to us from Cairo. Well, we'll move on to Burundi now, where authorities there say a grenade attack in the capital, Bujumbura, killed 5 people and injured another 50. According to Prime Minister Alain Guillaume Bunyoni, the attack is the latest in a series of explosions in the country. Over the weekend, there were grenade attacks on Burundi's administrative capital, Gitega, and another at Bujumbura Airport. In a Twitter post, Congo-based rebel group RED Tabara claimed responsibility for the airport attack. The terror group admitted to firing mortars as the president prepared to travel to New York for the UN General Assembly. Burundi's prime minister paid hospital visits to casualties of the explosion, saying that the government would clear their bills.
We encourage and thank the management and staff of this hospital who have made every effort to attend to these patients. We reassure once again that these patients will be well taken care of and treated, and all these expenses will be sent to the government for full payment.
It's time now for us to take a show break and return. Your business headlines, including Uganda Securities Exchange partners with MTN Uganda to launch country's first mobile sharing trading service. And Nigeria's real estate sector records highest growth since 2014.
This has taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Time now for the business stories. Uganda's Securities Exchange, in partnership with mobile telecom company MTN Uganda, recently launched a digital platform that will enable investors to open accounts and trade on the stock exchange using their mobile phones. The digital platform is intended to make it easier for more people to invest in the stock market. CGTN's Michael Baleka has more.
The electronic solution is meant to streamline the process for investors to open accounts, buy and sell shares, or make transfers on the stock market. The digital platform is expected to attract and grow investor numbers from the current 38,000.
We think that this is a game changer, that over probably the next couple of months, we probably should be in hundreds of thousands of investors, because we've made it easier for any Ugandan to open an account on the exchange and not go through the laborious process of dealing with paperwork.
Previously, people intending to invest on the stock exchange would see a stockbroker in person and manually fill in the paperwork. The new digital platform is expected to make the process much easier, safer, and faster. Both smartphone and non-smartphone users will have access to the mobile money platform.
They are now saying utilize MTN Momo to participate in opening an account, which allows you to buy shares. For today, phase 1. Phase 2 allows you to sell and even send money to the brokers. This is what opportunity is about. This is what including people, okay, in new forms of wealth creation is about.
MTN Uganda has the largest subscriber base of up to 15 million people. The telecom company also offers mobile financial services. On average, the Uganda Securities Exchange opens between 2,000 and 2,500 new accounts every year. Through research, they found out the numbers have remained low because the process has not been convenient. But with the new electronic platform, the net will be cast wide across the country to capture new investors in places with access to mobile networks. MTN Uganda is also preparing to list 20% of its shares on Uganda's stock exchange, an opportunity for Ugandans to own a part of the South African-owned mobile telecom company.
Listing is a requirement and part of the guidelines, if you'd want to call it that, provided by the government of Uganda to MTN as part of its 12-year commitment, or what we call the license. So the key date there is June 2022, the time by which we should have done that.
An initial public offering was one of the conditions for the renewal of the firm's telecom operator's license last year. Investors will be keenly watching MTN's IPO, which is expected to be the biggest in Uganda's history and a major boost to the country's stock market. Michael Baleke, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Well, let's head over to Nigeria now, where the real estate sector there has seen increased investment interest. That's according to data from the country's Stats Bureau, which revealed that the sector recorded its highest growth since 2014. This is despite the slowdown in the economy that crippled consumer earnings and purchasing power. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam brings us the details of that report.
Nigeria's property market continues to thrive, defying the nation's economic turmoil. The industry recorded a 3.85% growth in the second quarter of 2021, posting a 6-year record high. With the increasing uncertainties in other sectors, including oil and gas, more investors are finding real estate a viable investment option.
The oil and gas, which everybody has been doing, is no more doing well again. So a good number of people are now going to the real estate sector because of its benefits. The value for housing does not depreciate. The whole success story can be attributed to the activities of the private sector in Nigeria. And I can tell you, the private sector can do more if there's enabling environment.
Experts say that the growth in the real estate sector is capable of boosting the nation's GDP.
It is very significant because once you record a growth in a particular sector of the economy, it adds up to the GDP. And when it adds up to the GDP, it creates employment. A lot of people are employed right now, people who are selling these materials, building materials, people who are building them. So you see more and more civil engineers and more builders making money right now.
Businesses in various sectors across Nigeria have hit rock bottom since the COVID-induced economic crisis. But the real estate sector continues to stand the test of time. Individual and institutional investors raising and deploying capital into the sector. But that doesn't address major issues like the housing deficit problem.
But the only challenge we are having is that the improvement we just recorded has not addressed the affordability of those houses. The success story is reflected at the hierarchy of the housing industry.
Industry players want government to ramp up efforts to sustain the growth and gains. They are recommending interventions like housing subsidies, a working mortgage system, improved land policies, and tackling insecurity issues. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Well, a remarkable story coming up after the break. Here it is. We'll look at how a South African bomb disposal specialist saves lives by preventing blasts.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival, and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Well, when South African Police Constable Motaung officially joined the force 16 years ago, no one could have imagined that her journey would take her from being an accounting clerk to being a bomb disposal specialist. Now, preventing potentially deadly explosions and saving lives is part of her daily routine. Motaung is one of the women being honored by the South African Police Services as part of its Phenomenal Women in the Police Service campaign. CGTN's Litsan Jamela brings us her story.
Constable Mamukso Motaung is one of only 18 female bomb disposal specialists in all of South Africa's police services, but that doesn't faze her.
As a female bomb technician, it doesn't matter whether I'm a female or I'm a male. So when I arrive in this unit, seeing that the men are the most that are dominating in the unit, women are few, but I'm going to do what these men can do. Because we trained equally. Whatever that we're doing on the training, we were treated equally so that we can handle each and every situation that we can face, whether you are a man or a human.
Constable Motaung's work entails responding to bomb-related incidents and explosive recoveries, amongst other things. We spent a day with her to better understand her line of work.
Let's say we've got a call that want assistance from us, saying that we've got a suspicious parcel there, maybe this box was there for long, so we don't know what is it, what is containing on that parcel. So they call us to go to attend to a certain incident like that. Then when we arrive at the scene, you put your bomb suit with your body, you don't use the bomb suit, then you first approach on the parcel to look at it. How does it place? Where does it place? How are you going to work on it? Then you retrieve back. Then when you retrieve back, you go and brief the commander in charge or the persons that is on the scene that this is what I've seen, this is how I'm going to work. Can you just prepare this kind of equipment for me so that I can get in and deal with the object or any device or any parcel that I found there.
I'll be scanning 1, 0, 3, 2, 1, 0.
This bomb disposal specialist has nerves of steel and is always ready to deal with any explosive situation.
Then ATM incidents, let's say we have been called. Remember, the first responders are the one who arrives first at the scene. Then they called us because they know how to treat different scenes. So in ATM bombing, because they know that the explosives has been used, they need to call the explosives unit. Then they will contact us, then we'll be activated to that scene. Then when we arrive at the scene, everything that we attended, we have to make the first walkthrough. The first walkthrough is when we check how dangerous is the scene. Then we work in the bomb suit to check what damages and the primary functions for us is to check the secondary devices in any of the ATM scenes. Then we go there, we check if there's any devices that didn't went off.
Mutaung quickly admits that this job can be scary.
It is very scary. What if that bomb goes off? And yes, it's like a police officer when he goes and attend the robbery scene or any scene that can come. Even if you can use your firearm, it's also scary that, hey, if I can get shot or if anything wrong happen, you understand? Same applies to our field. But to be honest with you, I've never had that mentally thing that of saying, it's scary, I'm not gonna do it, because I know that I've been trained for it, and I know that, I'm here, I'm saving the lives of the people.
Mutaung's work also requires her to carry out bomb scene investigations, which includes identification, collection, and examination of evidence. Yulisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, in South Africa.
Time now for the day's sports news. Kenya's under-20 women's football team is finalizing its preparations before facing neighbors Uganda in the second round of the 2022 under-20 Women's World Cup qualifiers. The Rising Starlets have a double-header against the Crested Cranes, with the first leg set for Saturday in Nairobi and the return leg 2 weeks later in Uganda. The team kicked off its preparations with a selection exercise to trim the team down to 30 players on September the 15th, led by Starlets head coach Charles Okere. Okere is banking on a youthful squad for a positive result against the visitors as they chase their first qualification to the global tournament. The Crested Cranes arrive in Nairobi